One of the most beautiful parts of a story is to observe the change of a character in that story. Yes, it is difficult to change a person, but when that person is put in certain circumstances, sometimes they have no choice but to change, and Breaking Bad is one of the productions that handles this character change the best. The transformation of a harmless and even wimpy man into a ruthless drug lord is told in a very elegant way, without rushing, and there is one question we keep asking ourselves while watching this series. How? How can a seemingly ordinary person have so much potential for evil? What psychological motivations can really transform a person into someone different? How does this transformation bring out emotions that have been suppressed in the past? And this video is about the philosophy of Breaking Bad. The series begins by introducing us to the character of Walter White, a high school chemistry teacher who lives with his wife and son, who is a gentleman and even shy. At the same time, he struggles with financial problems. Walter White, who cannot be enough for his family with the money he earns from teaching, even works as a car cleaner as a side job. In addition to these troubles, he is not a very respectable person. He is not taken seriously by the students in his class and is even made fun of. But his real breaking point begins when he learns a terrible truth about himself. One day Walter White learns that he has cancer and his doctor tells him that he has only a short time to live. A person who realizes that he has little time left in the world will necessarily make certain radical choices. Walter White chooses to set himself a difficult goal: he will leave as much money as he can to his wife and son until his death. But he knows that it is impossible to leave a legacy by teaching. So he chooses a darker path. With his knowledge of chemistry, he will get into the business of producing drugs, and he will make his former student Jesse, who knows the streets well, to market the drugs he produces. As this duo grows their drug business, parameters such as ambition, ego, and arrogance enter the equation, and as the story progresses, we witness the gradual transformation of a decent teacher into a ruthless criminal, a bully, and even a murderer as a result of his acquaintance with the underworld and his growing self-confidence. This character development of Walter White involves very interesting philosophical concepts, and the first concept we should focus on in his transformation process is death. The fact that Walter White has cancer and knows that he will die in a few months is a motivation that drives him. After all, when a person learns that he has a very short time to live, it is certain that he will never be the same again. He accepts his own death, even has to accept it. Because he has no other choice. Whether he likes it or not, he will die in a few months, so he has no choice but to accept his death. However, there is a point to be noted here. Does the self-confidence that comes with accepting one's death, which Martin Heidegger talks about, manifest itself in the same way in a cancer patient? After all, Walter White's situation is quite tragic, and a cancer patient facing an unusual death may not always have the same self-confidence. If we approach this problem with real-life examples, some cancer patients who realize that they are at the end of their life have a frustration with life, a psychological burnout. They may even look forward to their own death. But his actions are not so innocent. Although Walter has chosen a seemingly good goal of leaving a legacy for his family, his approach to the drug business reveals some mysteries in his character. After a few drug deals, he starts to make serious money. Even though this money will support his family for many years, Walter continues to use drugs, but there is a contradiction in his behavior. At first he tells himself that he is in this business to leave money for his family. But when he earns enough money, why doesn't he give up drugs and prefer to spend time with his family? This contradiction shows us that Walter White is a different person than we thought. There are still ambiguous aspects to this character. Breaking Bad is full of symbolic details, especially metaphors from the fields of science, art, and literature throughout the series, and the most prominent of these has some similarities with Heisenberg, the nickname Walter White chose for himself. First of all, Heisenberg's involvement in projects carried out by the Nazis keeps him on the dark side of the scientific community. Heisenberg's death is also due to cancer. If we go back to Walter White, he has a dual nature like a particle. One is Walter White, the master who is the family man, and the other is the cruel drug baron Heisenberg. But as Heisenberg starts to give importance to his personality, the family man side starts to blur and even disappear, just like the position of a particle. So we realize that Walter White is not as good as we thought he was. Even though he gives the impression of being a gentleman and a good person on the outside, he is far from being a good person. When he gets power and authority, he becomes extremely cruel. So the inference that Walter White was initially a good person and then turned into a bad person is wrong. Because Walter White was not initially a good person. He was harmless and cowardly. With the courage of approaching death, he reveals his dark and egoistic desires that he had suppressed. And there is one last place you have to go to understand these desires and to fully unravel the character of Walter White. And that is the character's potential, or rather his unrealized potential. Walter White is an extremely intelligent person. He has a great talent for chemistry, and in his youth he even contributed to a team that won the Nobel Prize. But when we look at him now, he is a disappointment for his potential. All this scientific talent wasted as a teacher in a high school where even the students don't take him seriously. It's tragic and even frustrating that a person with so much talent can't fulfill his potential, and through this analysis we can understand why he persistently continues to do drugs. Because it is through the drug business that he regains his failed potential. Even though the drug business is a dark way to fulfill potential, Walter White's chemistry skills allow him to produce drugs of superior quality, and this allows him to use his talent. It's also a way for him to regain the dignity that he hasn't had throughout his life. So throughout the series we realize that Walter is lying to himself. Even though he tries to disguise all these things as a devoted father who wants to help his family, he has deceived himself throughout the story. Because Walter White is someone who has been after power and might from the beginning. At the same time, he takes revenge for his failed past in this process. He even confesses this truth to his wife at the end. He answers Skylar's question, "Did you do all this for our family like this?"
For the family.
I did it for me. I liked it. I was good at it. I was alive.
By confessing this intention and revealing his true personality, we complete the philosophy of this character. If we summarize Walter's story from beginning to end, we can say that he technically achieved all his goals. He was hated by his family, but he left them a lot of money. He defeated his enemies one by one, and the name Heisenberg is now respected and even feared on the streets. Given all these parameters, did he win for this character? The question can be asked. And this question again needs to be answered through the dual personality of this character. Heisenberg won, but Walter White lost. We can say that Walter White rose to the level of a king in the underworld. When he dies, he doesn't even have a loved one around him. He has lost his loved ones one by one because of his arrogance, and years later, when there is nothing left of him in this world, his arrogance will have lost its meaning.